Hi Stella, welcome to the chat. It's great to see you.
Great to be back, Niall, and looking forward to a new 2024 season that you're recording and launching, and listening to the rest of them.
Yes, indeed, and it's a great pleasure to have you involved. And as you know, I'm a huge fan of your work, particularly your book "Humans at Work." So maybe like just to get us started, just for the people listening, maybe give us a quick kind of breakdown of your awesome career to date.
It's one of those full of pivots and unexpected yeses that takes you into a completely unexpected direction, right? So I was born and raised in the Soviet Union. I have never thought that I'll ever leave the borders of the country, of the federation, and I was a student at the time when the Soviet Union fell apart. I was privileged to graduate around the time when all of the investment from the US was coming to help transform the local economies. So I ended up on a project to privatize the state-owned enterprises and build a capital markets infrastructure. And um, Pricewaterhouse was the company that was given the money by USAID to do that. And I joined Pricewaterhouse. I went around the world with them to work in Moscow, to then move to US uh, was the company. And meanwhile, the company changed name from Pricewaterhouse, merged with Corporation Libra, and became PwC. Then IBM acquired, and I joined IBM in the process. All throughout this experience, I have played management consulting role, technology, at the intersection of technology, system implementation, and it was always a natural progression to develop the next understanding to impact the work environment. So it was, let's change the processes. So I moved into process improvement. Let's change the service delivery model. I moved into service delivery transformation. All the way until I had the opportunity at IBM already to do some forward-looking type work, focused on future work. Um, and we developed a strategy for IBM's future of work. We built and experimented with a variety of technology solutions to create a sentiment analysis tool for understanding what people talk about. And so it was early 2012, 2013 when all of this was being built. So we were way ahead of our time. Of course, a lot of that natural language processing capabilities are now available and used widely, but it was early experimentation for us. And we also had a really, really cool access to charter of over 450,000 employees around the world. So it gives us lots of data and learned a lot about the power of analytics as well as the power of technology to create a better workplace experience. And I think all of that really shaped my worldview of how worker conditions can be changed in a positive way, and the importance of worker voice in the process to influence decisions that are impacting them directly and be part of that change.
Yeah, and I mean, this is like you're singing from my hymn sheet. Really, I do a lot of work in the leadership space, and really, what I'm challenging companies to do is to try and understand um, the importance of relationships as a leader, and relationships not in the sense that you have to be all best friends, but relation in the sense that you build trust. And Paul, I was talking to Professor Paul Zach earlier, and he's written a ton of books on trust, and his research is incredible. But the whole link between high trust organizations, good culture, and high productivity, lower absenteeism, all those kind of things, it's remarkable. But what I love about the work, and I love the book yourself and Anna wrote, because it's such a, like, my view of the world is that real experts simplify things, and that's kind of what my company tagline is. It's what I do with all the work I do. I don't hide behind complicated models and technical terms. I like to speak in very simple language. And that doesn't mean that the research and the work isn't there, like there isn't some solid, robust stuff behind it. But what you guys managed to do with that book, I mean, humans at work, it's such a simple term, but it's the simple concept that, the complete, what I found fascinating was there was such a befuddlement in the world when we had lockdown. And then suddenly we went to a world of remote working when the corporate world didn't trust its employees to do their job, and now suddenly they had to. They had no choice. And the amazing thing that came off the back of that is that people's productivity went up working from home. And still companies didn't trust, and they still don't. And a lot of them see remote working as being some annoyance that has to be navigated instead of accepting that, if you allow flexibility and adaptability to employees, you will get so much back in return. So I guess, you know, that's all my view, which, I'm pretty certain people tuning in don't really care what I have to say, and they'll probably hear me say the same bloody thing every episode anyway. But I'm really keen to hear what you have to say. And one of the things I think is really interesting is you talk a lot about the importance of placing employees at the center of hybrid workplace strategies. Talk to me a little bit about that, and about how, I suppose, what I love is the practical application of theories. So maybe let's have a conversation that's about the practical application of these theories.
Absolutely. I am exhibit A in the practical application of that theory. I've worked as a remote employee for most of my career. I would travel to client sites when I needed to be. Most of the time I would work from home, and I had all my equipment, all my strong Wi-Fi access to all the tools that I needed, such that I'm productive regardless of where I do the work. And when the pandemic began, I there was no difference for me. I just continued on with whatever I was doing. And I knew the power of choice. I knew that I know and I can choose when I go to the office, when it's important to have that FaceTime value, when it's important to make the trip, versus when it's important for me to stay home, be that to have focused time and uninterrupted by office water coolers, or needed to take care of family circumstances. So the ability to be productive in that environment required, of course, lots of discipline. It required changing your habits to know that you have to get up in the morning, take a shower first, because otherwise you'll never get the chance to do it later in the day. You need to create a space where you have quiet time. You need to block in your schedule walking outside, so you get some exercise, because it's very easy to be stuck in front of the laptop and only pick up your face when it's dark outside. So a lot of those little practices, they are not coming with a manager telling you what to do, or it doesn't necessarily involve IT department, but obviously it requires some trust of the worker that they will do what it needs to get done, whether that work happens during the day or it happens at night after working hours, just because that's when the focus time happens, and that's when the best productive work happens, at least for me. And as more and more technology invades our lives, or actually comes to save the day with a lot of productivity tools, I think life of a road warrior is becoming easier in essence. A lot of companies are finally realizing that you don't need to punish employees to carry, multiple equipment, multiple devices, only to protect the security of the company. There are technical ways to solve a lot of those problems. There are virtual collaboration tools that are getting more and more sophisticated, but all of that requires a very deliberate design mindset. You really need to think about the solutions not from the standpoint of how much more productivity I can squeeze out of people while I reduce my cost of the infrastructure. And instead, we need to think what it's like to be a worker, and the workflow that you have to deal with, and the sophistication of the tools that are put in front of you, and how they interplay with your activity throughout the day. If you have a bunch of tools that are not integrated, that you have to always remember passwords and reset them, and they're clunky. Sometimes you do not know if it is your skills that is lacking, or is the system that is not set up properly. All of those little things make a significant difference in people's work. And I always use my example of showing the smartphone, right? How much upskilling have we gone through to use it? Very basic, rudimentary, a few steps, and then you figure out the design pattern and off you go. Why can't we have the same type of thinking in the context of the work environment to make the workplace work around us? Because increasingly it's fusion workplace, right? It's more digital and physical. You cannot say that it's exclusively physical, it's exclusively digital. In some cases, that are extremes, but for the most part, you have an interplay of the two. So you need to involve IT department, you need to involve real estate, you need to involve communications teams, you need to involve managers that are designing some of these workflows to have a conversation around making the work experience easier for people to do their work. And it's not an HR conversation. It's really a lot more coordinated, um, similarly to how customer experience got transformed, right? You have technology and digital leaders, you have analytics, you have marketing teams, all of them coming together to solve for customer experience. I think the same type of collaboration is necessary to emerge for the worker experience as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and it leads me into something actually because you've spoken a lot about the kind of the essential pillars of hybrid workspaces, and you talk about the digitization of work and distributed workplaces, organizational redesign, changing workforce. Talk to me a little bit about that and what do people need to consider if they're going to deliver for their people the best hybrid workstation possible or workplace possible.
My ideal scenario is a blank sheet of or blank screen with just an entry bar, similarly to how you do Google searches and now you use ChatGPT or similar type of technologies, where you type what you want to do, or even you speak, because some people may not have necessarily the dexterity or the physical capacity to interact with technology through um, haptics. So you need to provide multi-channel access to the workplace. So let's assume you speak to your computer and say, I want to do this type of transaction in the system, and the system knows all the backend integrations that need to happen in order to provide you access and authenticate you when you log into that system. You're able to perform it, whether it's voice activated or any other medium that you choose to interact with it. The experience of doing that work doesn't make you feel dumb, right? You have all the information you need to make the decisions. You have the knowledge or the access to the knowledge base. Possibly you have access to the experts who are able to help with anything that is out of the ordinary. And by the time you're complete, you have solved the problem. It's not just about, hey, I wanted to do this transaction and I have a goal of performing this transaction in 5 seconds, and I did 6 seconds and now I'm penalized for it, right? So you have to have not only the design of the experience, but also the context around it, the reward structure, the measurements, the access to the necessary resources for you to do what you need to do in a way that it's the most impactful or accomplishes the ultimate goal, not just the effort that you put into it. I know that's a very simplistic and very aspirational way of describing it. And of course, technologically speaking, we have a long way to go. And unfortunately, a lot of the technical investments go towards the customer facing or kind of business operations activities, and less so towards the employee experience. But at the same time, if you are an employee who has no clue what good experience feels like, how would you deliver that to your customers, right? So it's an important consideration to put that on the strategic priority for leaders inside the organization to influence it in a positive way. Um, the other, I think, aspect is to really look at it through the lens of empathy. And yes, this is part of the design thinking, but empathy for all involved, right? Many times we talk about great experience for employees, and somehow that assumes that it's just the front line, kind of the entry level people who are doing kind of the brand work. You have to have empathy for the leadership and management and business as a whole, and the suppliers that you work with or whoever's involved in your value chain, and for the environment. So there are a lot of considerations that you need to put in place and raise awareness. A lot of times we may make decisions related to the workplace experience through the lens of cost management and only for the benefit of shareholders. But there is a broader ecosystem that needs to be included in the thinking. And when you do that, and you have a positive impact on, let's say, the community where workers work, that empathy will come back in terms of greater productivity, it will come in terms of greater reputation of the organization, better talent pipeline, because people want to associate their talent with you, better probably customer results and satisfaction. So it's a broader, complex system that needs to be accounted for when designing seemingly small workplace experience for workers.
Yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it? Like the design of the space is so important to kind of encouraging flexibility, I suppose. Um, and would that be something from your kind of perspective, kind of, I suppose, from your experience working with with large organizations, large multinational organizations, and now with all the work you do in this space, like, do you find that it's a challenge just getting people to understand design of a work environment?
Absolutely. It is a challenge from multiple perspectives. And I think there are a lot of tensions. There is no right answer or one single answer. There is a spectrum of aspects, I guess, to consider. One, where you are in your career, right? If you are a recent graduate, have never had the chance to work in a corporation, there is a lot of tacit knowledge that is missed just because you are not there to observe how things get done. So having sufficient presence of people with different experiences and longevity and tenure that allow this knowledge to be built up, especially for early in their career workers, it's critical, it's important. And you cannot replace virtual interaction. You really need to have opportunities to build the relationships, to go have a meal, build some social capital for people to be able to then work well remotely. You also need to consider a lot of the real estate investments many companies made, and those are usually long term. And if you're paying for the space, may as well get the most out of it, right? So unless your rent is expiring, you're kind of stuck with it, and you have to justify your expenditures in that. There are also economic considerations from metropolitan centers that are reliant upon that business clientele to go consume lunches and services and pay for the public transportation, all of the things that are built into the city center infrastructure. So there is another push for that to draw people to come into the metropolitan areas. And of course, you also have to account for people's life stage, where they are at. A lot of people will choose companies that allow them to come to the office because they need that sense of belonging. They need to have that sense of um, uh, camaraderie and see people. Other people may have little children at home and they have so much going on. They're so much more productive at night when children are in bed. So having that flexibility to accommodate people's needs at their life stage as they need to take care of whatever is happening in their lives. It's important. And it's all about a conversation between the manager and the individual. And back to your point of trust, right? If you have the trust between the manager, um, knowing how to describe what needs to get done and setting clear boundaries and clear goals and expectations, at the same time having an employee who gets the work done as they were tasked to do, it's a dance. And over time, you don't need a lot of parameters, you don't need performance goals, you don't need monitoring on your laptop to know that the people are doing what they need to get done. Most of us are adults and we need to be treated as such.
Most of
Unfortunately,
us.
the most of us, a lot of the contextual structures, right? The performance systems, the monitoring of your devices to make sure you're in front of your laptop. A lot of those things very quickly erode that trust and make people's even if they were very trustworthy and they're very conscientious, their trust in the company and their relationship with the company will start eroding and the engagement is going to go down. So in a way, it's a vicious cycle that will be perpetuated by putting some of those things in place.
Mm. And there is a real challenge to leadership styles in all of this, isn't there? Like the idea of understanding workplace norms and how we deal with, I don't know, performance evaluation or even communication, team dynamics, productivity demands, all these things from a leadership point of view. I mean, on top of the trust and the human aspect of it, the human aspect of having to adapt your style to allow, and actually one of the things I think that often gets overlooked in this is the fact that, I believe is something that should be done at the onboarding level is a simple conversation with people about how they work best, understanding like that you have people who are, potentially neurodiverse or just challenged in certain areas and may hate emails but love phone calls or vice versa or whatever the case may be. But that the big challenge now is to kind of develop it out into something that's very mindful of, I need to give my team the best opportunity to thrive. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. There are a couple of solutions, technical. Well, one is a technology solution, another one is just a company called Ultranauts, um, who 75% of their workforce are neurodivergent people. They focus predominantly in technical development, technical testing. So it's the type of work that requires a lot of focused attention, and it's well suited for people um, who are neurodivergent. And when people join, they create their profile. They describe how they prefer to work, how they prefer to be given feedback, how they prefer to be interrupted or not, and when, because those are very important for them if are not done well. So the better you communicate what you need and how you prefer to be engaged with, the better everybody else around you will be. The technology solution, and I'm an advisor to the company, it's called Luna, Luna, and they have this concept called POP, personal operating profile. So it's the same type of concept where you describe what matters to you, how do you prefer to work, what type of schedule you would like to have. And it's a vehicle to have communications with your team and with your manager to set some expectations or at least have a neutral way to articulate what matters to you at this point in time. And again, it's not something that has to be permanent. It's an ongoing tool that, as life changes and things change, you can adapt and um, use this to communicate how your life is changing and your needs are changing as well.
That's very cool, actually. I'd like to kind of explore that a bit. So, the idea, so technology is you know, it's depending on the angle that you look at it from, is either the salvation of us all or the end of us all. And I've been heavily involved in research into AI recently, and understanding it. Um, and I kind of feel like we're 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 missing a trick with the AI thing, because there is huge beneficial there's huge opportunities with AI for us to do something really cool and radical and different. You're a big fan of understanding technology and the way it enhances in the workplace, aren't you?
I am a big fan, and I'm a big fan of AI. I'm a big fan of large language models, at least the emergent ones. And I keep joking that I have several employees. I have Bard, I have Bing, I have ChatGPT, I have Perplexity, I have Claude, and they all are used for different purposes, and they all have their strengths and unique capabilities. But it is part of my team, right? I have a digital team that I outsource certain activities to. And on one side, I have these moments when, like, as a consultant, I probably should look for another career. Majority of my work that I used to spend time and consider, as something that I charge for or make money on, which is time. Now, the effort that I need to spend on some of the activities has shrunk. So it feels really out of integrity to charge for the time that I'm not doing. But at the same time, I have to rethink what is the value that I'm adding. Yes, I can be a lot more productive in transcribing the podcast or starting um, a research effort, but it's still me and my knowledge and my experience and point of view that I have to use to ask the right questions to um, put together the right presentation and the right story. I think a lot of the efficiency expectations are overblown in my mind, related to integration of AI. There's a lot of value in bringing it and using it effectively. But I don't think we should expect that, let's cut, hundreds of people just because AI is going to do all of this work. I think you still need that unique human touch, perspective, point of view, experience to bring it all together and present it in an authentic way. Because authenticity, I think, is going to be the other key word in addition to trust. But you have to have the authenticity in order to build that trust. So I think that those two are connected.
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of both of those things. I think actually, do you know, just on that for a second, the a lot of the time I do leadership training and I talk about authenticity, and I constantly get asked the question, what is authenticity? Like what's an authentic leader?
It's a leader who knows themselves and has a set of values that drives their decisions and their behavior, and what they do aligns to those values, right? Because when you say one thing but you do something different, even though this the solution may be better, or you may be perceived in a more positive or more confident or more accomplished way, it's very easy to determine, or to sense the inauthenticity in that. We have that intuition, we have that very easy detector to spot when there is a incongruence between the two. And I think it's a natural human behavior to pay attention to those signals and cues as manager or leader or whoever behaves around you inauthentically.
What do you see has been the biggest blocker to organizations changing? Because a lot of organizations kind of felt at the end of the pandemic they wanted to go back to the way things were rather than acknowledge that things were different. What do you think is the biggest challenge to that?
I think, and there may be more, but I think there are several factors, at least that I see. One, you have the leadership layer that have had the privilege of, you know sports systems at home, and, you know um, privilege of living nearby, so they don't have a long commute. A lot of things that were working well before the pandemic. So there is a degree of nostalgia and comfort level to go back to where things were before. There is another component that is related to the systems at work, right? The how promotions are decided, right? It's still whoever shows up in the office, and I've experienced this as I was progressing through my career as a remote worker, right? If you're out of sight, out of mind, promotion gets impacted. Your compensation and reward structure is still not adapted to the distributed work. It's management skills, right? We have managers who are used to seeing you work or seeing you at work and therefore considering that you're doing the work, as opposed to having people who are more coaches and collaborators that can guide you such that you are able to do your work independently and you're able to resolve conflicts with your teammates if those occur. So it's a different skill set that is needed to adapt. And I think we haven't invested sufficiently in the development of those skills and in
Hmm.
changing some of the practices to make this work. I love some of the companies that are moving to remote first. Um, but again, it's a different type of culture and it takes momentum. And I love the name of the podcast, Inertia Creep, right? You have a lot of inertia that is continuing, and 3 years of pandemic didn't do anything to it, right? So you still
Hmm.
have that big um, tanker going down the river, and it will be very difficult to steer it in a different direction just because the whole system is set up to preserve kind of the status quo.
Absolutely right. Yeah, and that's the whole thing. And that was actually, to be honest with you, that's where my thinking came from with the name of the show. It's something where, I frequently reference I think it was Churchill who said that the only thing evil needs to thrive is for good men to do nothing. And I feel like, there's an element of like inertia and in, apathy maybe in the corporate world especially. And I think that grows, and the more that grows, the more dangerous it gets. So I think we have to challenge it, but I like to challenge it. And what I love about conversations like this, and some of the other conversations I'm fortunate enough to have for this show, is that it's very practical. Like what you are coming from it from a practical point of view, which means that it's much more accessible to people. It's much easier for people to embrace it and get on board with it. If you were to give a company kind of the most important tips, just say we were to kind of streamline your entire career and everything that we've talked about today down into a couple of takeaway tips, what would be the kind of key messages that you would kind of want them to think about when they, because for a lot of these organizations, they want to do these things. They want to be authentic and they want to build trust and they want a good culture. But where I find a lot of organizations fail is that they you have to start where you're at. So if you're not willing to acknowledge exactly where your culture is at, then all the work you do is irrelevant, because you can have this dream to have this fabulous culture, but you have to be honest and secure enough to look at, well, this is where we're at right now and this is a journey. So for me to come to you, and I know fundamentally my culture is broken and I'm willing to start where I'm at, but I'm coming to you and saying, look, I need to fix this stuff. And I agree with everything you're saying. And all of these things make sense. But where do I start? Like, what do I do to build this thing?
Start with listen, right? It's really important to show your workforce that you're paying attention to what they have to say, because the ability for people to have a voice and be able to influence some of the internal practices is going to go a long way. So back to the example of the sentiment tool that we built at IBM, the the case in point came after I already left IBM. There was a consultant who went online to articulate why a policy that HR issued that would have prevented, wouldn't reimburse Uber travel, was a bad decision, especially a bad idea for consultants who are always on the road. And there was a lot of people who commented, a lot of people tagged and liked that post, and it got picked up by the tool and it got escalated and policy reversed within 16 hours. So it was a perfect example of how, if you listen to the worker voice, it not only allows you to get in front of a lot of the issues, but it will show people that, hey, if a lot of us complain about this, something will get done. That's kind of a first step, right? Set up whatever system you have in place to listen to what employees have to say that are irritants. Because a lot of the disengagement issues are not big, dramatic issues that have to be solved at the company level. Sometimes they're minor little irritant that gets in the way of them. I don't know, dripping faucet in the hallway that makes you annoyed by the noise. So listen to what people have to say. Second part is engage them in solutioning. They on the ground will know what works best and how you can solve the problem in the easiest way. Allow them to do that and make them part of the solution, and don't assume somebody at the center will know all the answers and will be able to come up with one size fits all solution, because you're diluting a lot of the answers. So that goes back to the trust conversation. And then the last one is really um, not looking at the transformation as a project. It is, as you said, a journey. It's a shift in the mindset. It's an ongoing um, change and adaptation. So building that mindset of adaptation and resilience and looking at it as a long-term effort that is part of the culture is going to be critical. Otherwise, everybody's going to say, well, we're going to have a project. We'll be checking this checkbox in 3 months, and then we're done. It's never done. It's an ongoing process as new things happen in the environment, as new technologies occur, as new issues emerge. So the more we can stay flexible and adaptable, the more likely we'll be successful in the long term.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, that's just real quality, and it kind of. I can see why your company is called Reframe. I understand I'm a big fan of reframing memory. I believe it's a really interesting psychological tool. This idea that what happens to you. Um, I use this quote all the time, but there's a Aldous Huxley quote that says, "Experience is not what happens to you; it's what you do with what happens to you." And reframing memory is that kind of concept of taking what's happened to you and channeling it in a different way, so it's not something that derails you. And that's kind of where you're at, isn't it? Really, but from the point of view of the company, that you're reframing the challenges. I suppose is that the accurate reflection of what you guys are at?
It is. And I would add one more thing. It's not only what happened to you and how you deal with it, but also the story you tell as a result of it. And I think that's the important part. Work plays such a huge role in our lives, in how we shape our identity and how we perceive our worth. So what happens at work matters. And if we tell the story to our family, because we're going to bring all the negative into our personal life, there's no longer separation between the two. It matters, right? We have to have a place where we feel proud of going and being part of. We have to have meaning and make impact and not do bullshit jobs. We have to have a way to sustain our families, so have a living wage and not have to piece up, 3 part-time jobs in order to pay the bills. Really have to provide working conditions for people to do the work and not be just widgets in the big value creation machine. And I think that's where the next generation of leaders need to pay attention to, because let's face it, uh, you know, there are fewer and fewer people being born. Demographically speaking, we're going to have a lot of problems. A lot more people are living longer, but our career span does not necessarily expand and does not adapt to accommodate for that. Our social security and safety nets are not adapted to support people another 30 years post their career. So we really need to start questioning some of these fundamental structural constructs to adapt to bigger longevity, fewer younger population, lower taxes you'll be able to collect on that working age, classically defined as 15 to 64 years old. Um, we'll need to question a lot of things that constitute corporations and how we allow people to participate, engage meaningfully, and how we derive and extract value from this relationship. Because even the notion of value is changing too, right? What is value? In my time, there was a number of hours that I would work and I would charge for that. Now that is changing. How do I define or redefine that? Or how do I redefine the amount of salary I need to pay to an employee who now is augmented by technology and can get a lot more stuff done and be a lot more productive? Are they going to get increase in their salary by being a lot more productive? Right. So a lot of things that we can start questioning and putting it through that reframing lens, given the advancements of technology, advancements of scientific discoveries, and just shaping the expectations of workers from the work environment and their relationship with work.
Fantastic. So much food for thought. Stella, I really appreciate you taking the time. It is really important work you're doing and really, really interesting. And hopefully people listening to this will get some real food for thought. And obviously I will share your the details of your company and stuff when we launch this so that people can get in touch with you. But brilliant stuff. Thanks so much. And I look forward to chatting to you soon. We do some work together. Thanks so much for taking the time. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Niall.